Hi, I am Dr. Falatimi Akinriade. I'm an occupational therapist and recreational therapist, and this YouTube channel is to provide general knowledge and education related to what I do in pediatrics, working with children of all abilities. This channel is not to replace any professional care or treatment. I'm just providing my personal experiences, again, on what I do on a day-to-day basis. This video in particular is going to be addressing how to help a child become more independent with dressing themselves. So when I talk to parents and I ask parents, what is happening at home when the child is trying to get dressed themselves, or if you tell the child first thing in the morning to get dressed and you just watch and see what they do, what all are they able to do or help out with when it comes to dressing? And parents will typically cover their head a little bit and they'll tell me that they tend to do all of the dressing stuff for their child. And they explain to me that in the morning when everyone's needing to get ready for school or when they have to go to work, they are just trying to get everybody out of the house on time, that it is just quicker and easier for them to just do everything for the child. And trust me, I completely understand. I empathize first thing in the morning when you're doing so many things, especially if there's multiple kids in the house or multiple family members in the house, and you're thinking about breakfast and everything else, it is easier to help the child. And even with me, when I'm in the clinic and I'm working with kids in my sessions, and I want them to work on getting their socks and shoes on at the end of the session, if the session's running over or if my next kid shows up early, I'm just thinking in my head, if I could just put on this child's socks and shoes myself, everything would just be quicker and easier and smoother, and the transition would be so much better. So I definitely understand where the challenge comes in, especially in the morning. I will say that this does become more of an issue because even when I'm working with the cutest 4-year-old ever and they're tired and they want me to put on their jacket for them or they want me to put on their socks and shoes for them, and I'm just like, you are so adorable and I want to do everything for you. The issue becomes when that 4-year-old child becomes 7 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, 18 years old, or 21-year-old, and we're still having to help them get dressed because they weren't able to work on those skills when they were younger. And as they get older, things become more complicated and frustrating, and honestly, more of a burden too for the caregiver that's helping them, but also for the child too. So it is really helpful to try and get a child to participate in dressing as best they can. And that does not mean that they have to do everything themselves, but are they able to practice and try and do some things on themselves so they're able to progress that skill set that they have. So before I talk about my personal experience with strategies that have helped kids and families that I've worked with, I want to emphasize once again that this does not replace professional expertise or professional knowledge. These are things that have worked with some of the kids that I've worked with in the past. But if your child is having difficulties with dressing, I strongly recommend that you talk with your child's physician or you receive an occupational therapy evaluation, just because there could be a myriad of reasons why a child may be struggling with getting dressed or may be resistant to getting dressed. There could be a sensory standpoint of it where they don't like the texture or the feeling of the clothing, or maybe the child may have a very involved or severe deficit that is truly impacting their ability to get dressed in the morning. And we want to properly assess and get professional opinions and advice on how you are able to help your child, just so we're not causing any harm to the child when we're working on these things. So things that have been helpful in the past. The first thing is being able to set aside a time and create a routine to work on dressing. So first thing in the morning when everyone is rushing to get out of the house and you're working on so many different things at one time, may not be the best time to work on dressing for the child. Maybe when a child is getting home from school and they are changing from their school clothes into their house clothes, or even at night when the child is getting into their pajamas, maybe evening is when you're able to set aside an extra 5 or 10 minutes to work on dressing with the child. That way you have a little bit more patience, you're able to dedicate more time to the child and truly work on that skill when you're not needing to rush first thing in the morning. And creating a routine also allows the child to get into that mindset that, okay, every time that it's time for me to go to bed or it's time for me to get on my pajamas, this is what I'm going to be working on, allows for them to kind of set up that mindset or set up that perspective of, this is something that I'm going to be working on. This is a skill set that I'm going to be working on each night. So even for me, when children come to see me in the clinic, and again, we might be working on them getting on or off their socks and shoes, the second they come into the clinic, they know that they need to take off their socks and shoes before we go play. And obviously the first few times they're a little resistant because they just immediately want to go into the gym and have fun. But after a certain point in time, they know that when they come in and they see Miss Timmy, they're going to take off their socks and shoes and then they can play. And for the most part, the children tend to be pretty understanding once they truly get a hand of that routine. So whatever time you choose to work on dressing, just try and be consistent with that on a daily basis. The second thing is making things fun and play-based. So anytime you can add any type of playful activity onto a challenge a child is working on can definitely help make it become a motivating factor for that child and inspire them to try and work through this challenge so they can continue to have fun. There's also a ton of research that shows that children learn best through play. So anytime you can add any type of play-based activity into anything a child is working on, it's even better for them. So making things play-based could be getting dressed into different costumes. So either prince or princess costumes or action figures or characters in movies could be something that is motivating for the child to work on getting dressed. But at the same time, you don't even need to buy costumes. Some children may find it silly or fun to be able to put on their siblings' clothes or to put on their parents' clothes as well. So it's something that you already have around the house, but it's something silly that they can do and they can still get the practice in on putting on and taking off a lot of clothes. Another thing could be if a child has a doll, a baby doll or a Barbie doll or an action figure and they want to dress the action figure, that's something that may be fun and motivating to them. And if you are creative and you know how to use a sewing machine, another alternative can be that the child can wear clothes that match their doll's clothes also. So if the doll is wearing a red shirt that day, can the child also wear a red shirt that day so they can match the doll and have fun being able to walk around in matching outfits with that doll. That could be something that's exciting. It could be something that they look forward to doing. And that way they can get more repetitions and practice in with that as well. So another fun and silly activity that you can do is have sock puppets. So obviously we normally don't put socks on our hands, but if a child is resistant to putting socks on or not wanting to participate in dressing at all, being able to associate socks with something that's fun and silly will help promote that positive association with it. And it's really good because you can also work on your fine motor skills putting the socks on. The third thing I recommend is putting on one article of clothing at a time and mastering that article of clothing before you switch onto something else. So the way I put on socks and pants is completely different than the way I put on a shirt or a jacket. So having a child work on the entire clothing sequence can be extremely overwhelming because there's so many body parts involved. There's so many things with orientation and sequence that can be really tricky for the child. So I would focus on one article, maybe again their socks or their pants, whether it's taking them on or taking them off, and then you can do the rest of their clothing for them. So they're only focusing on that one thing at a time. And then once they master that, then you can move on to the next article of clothing. And the fourth and last thing is focusing on articles of clothing that are easier first. So again, putting on a jacket is extremely tricky. You have to think about putting one arm through one sleeve, trying to find the sleeve behind you to put it through the other arm, making sure that the jacket's not upside down or inside out. There's so many components. You have to zip up the jacket too. There's so many components involved with putting on a jacket, and that is not something that I would immediately work on with a child if they're still working on putting on all articles of clothing. So again, putting on socks or taking off socks tends to be a little bit easier to work on because you're able to address it almost anywhere. The child's able to sit down, use both hands, and visually look at what they're doing. So that's something that I tend to start off with. And although everybody hits their milestones differently and everybody learns in different ways, as a generalization, typically from a developmental milestone standpoint, it's easier to take off clothing before learning how to put it on. So for the most part, I tend to recommend a child working on taking off their socks, taking off their pants, taking off their shirt, taking off their jacket before learning how to put the clothes on. But again, everybody learns differently, so it's based on each child and what they respond best to. So I hope all of this was helpful information. I hope that you're able to gain some understanding on how we work on helping children get dressed. Thank you all for watching. If you have any comments or questions or anything, please comment below, and I will see you all soon. Thanks, bye.